Are we ready to start? I'm hoping that's yep, we're ready, because I only have so much time to do this in. Okay. Right. Well, this is the second class in the series. We're reading from Seeds from a Birch Tree, Writing Haiku and the Spiritual Journey by Clark Strand. I'm going to read a segment and then we will practice writing haiku and discussing what we have learned in the book. So we're going to start with counting syllables. The place to begin is counting syllables. 5, 7, 5. At this point, the mathematician and the child are about on par. If anything, the child may be better at counting naturally and with presence of mind. If we take up Zen meditation, we will be given the practice of counting our breaths from 1 to 10, coming back to 1 whenever we lose count. When we reach 10, we begin again. Anyone who has tried this for any length of time will know how often various thoughts and worries interfere with this simple task. But in time we learn to count, something we always thought we knew but in fact performed only by rote. Performed artlessly but with complete presence of mind, counting becomes an expression of sincerity. It promotes the kind of humility that becomes the basis for a clear, straightforward vision of the world. Both in meditation and in haiku, counting must become a very present, wholehearted activity. When we practice meditation, we begin by sitting cross-legged on the floor with our buttocks firmly supported by a cushion. Next, we erect our spine and sway gently back and forth to find the proper point of balance. Once we have settled down, the ears will be on line with the shoulders and the navel with the nose. The eyes remain half open, gazing at a space before us on the floor. Left over right, the hands form a relaxed but clear-looking oval, resting palms up in our laps, and the tips of the thumbs just touch. When we look at someone sitting in this way, they seem attentive but very calm. We may think of them as beautiful or even wise. It is for this reason that even people who do not practice Zen or any form of Buddhism often have Buddha statues in their homes, to remind them of the serenity found in simple forms. Of course, even people who do not practice Zen can write haiku, for pleasure or even as a spiritual path. Like Zen, haiku has its own form and specific guidelines for practice, but people frequently do both Zen and haiku and find that they complement each other in a natural way. Haiku may complement other spiritual paths as well. If we have no interest in using haiku as a spiritual practice, it is unnecessary to count syllables at all. We could, for instance, write a haiku in any form, 1 line, 4, or 17, and include the season or not as we pleased. But I doubt we could take much long-term satisfaction from this kind of haiku. I doubt if haiku would endure beyond a few decades in America if it were practiced in this way. Because haiku is so subtle, it is necessary to have some definite form. Otherwise, beginners will have no place to start, and experts will soon forget their beginner's mind in the obsession over where to break a line. Already there are too many experts of this kind. There is a mistaken belief that form is confining and limiting. In reality, nothing has done more to limit the development of haiku in English than this idea. Ultimately, it is the very strictness of haiku which allows us to forget the form and enter into a more profound relationship with nature and other people. Once forgotten in this way, the form becomes unbelievably playful and light. When the form remains unfixed, however, then poets become stuck at the level of form. Paradoxically, by rejecting it, they become its captive. Counting is a universal practice. Its humble, straightforward vision of man and nature is at the core of all human experience. However far we may stray from it, everything comes back to this. And then he gives us a haiku example. Rain at the window. How many more ants before the end of summer? And because I stumbled, I'm going to repeat that. Rain at the window. How many more ants before the end of summer? And then we go into reading a haiku. A paulownia leaf, caught all the while in sunlight, flutters to the ground. And this one was by Takahama Kiyoshi and was translated to English by Donald King. The Japanese poet Takahama Kiyoshi is said to have claimed that, for him, this verse expressed all the wonder of heaven and earth. The American scholar Donald King suggests, however, that it would take an exceptionally sensitive reader to discover such dimensions in the poem. I do not agree. You can discover these dimensions for yourself, and this is how. Repeat the poem several times out loud until you are able to recite it without looking at the page. Feel the sound and rhythm of the words. In this case, the poem is a translation, but a good one, so you should be able to get some of the feeling of Kiyoshi's original poem. When you are able to recite the poem from memory, keep saying it silently to yourself as you begin to imagine the scene. Watch the leaf as it comes loose from the branch. Watch how vividly it flutters in the sunlight on its way to the ground. Don't hurry. Allow the imaginary leaf to make every revolution as it falls. Keep watching it until it comes to rest, still sunlit, lying upon the ground. When you have practiced reading in this way for a while, you will begin to discover that you are able to experience many different layers in the sound and texture of the poem. A single haiku then becomes a journey. King said it would take an exceptionally sensitive reader to discover the layers of Kiyoshi's poem. In reality, it only takes a poet. You can become a poet if you practice reading haiku in this way. And then he gives us several different examples of haiku. Hot rock by the stream, each of the baby's toe prints evaporating. That was by Ruth Yarrow. Swim beach at low tide, a fragment of blue seagrass with the rocks and shells, by Susan Rudnick. The cat fluffs his fur and tries to avoid the cold of his own shadow, by Perdita Finn. Dew-covered shore stones all the way down to the lake and underwater, by Dennis Davidson. Weather-beaten boots, little steel clips reflect light that warms the sharp air, by Sharon Lee. So I can repeat those again later if you want to hear them again to pick them apart. We're going to move on to the 4 seasons. Nearly every haiku contains a kigo, or season word. From the beginning of the purpose of haiku was to evoke a seasonal feeling, the kind of feeling you get from watching leaves fall in autumn or from waking to the sight of a freshly fallen snow. A haiku uses a season word in conjunction with another image or phrase to record such feeling and to evoke them in the reader's mind. But what exactly is a seasonal feeling? The phenomenon is too rich and varied to ever fully define it, but one helpful way of looking at it is to realize that seasonal feeling always has 2 aspects. Hello, Harlow. the fleetingness of light, and the eternal harmony of the natural world. In other words, the passing seasons. Seasonal feeling, then, is a way of realizing that all things come into being, have their lives, and pass away within the larger context of nature, something so vast and all-inclusive that we could never see it whole. In haiku, the use of words belonging to a certain season allows us to evoke the whole of nature by referring to one particular thing. For that reason, you might say that the season word functions as an anchor, a point of connection with the natural world. The things of nature, wrote Kenneth Yasuda, are born and fade away in the rhythm of the seasons. The same holds true for humankind in all its works. Thus, when we look at nature, we are looking at something of which we are a part. Being human, we can stand aside and consider, for instance, what images we want to use to form a poem. But those images, like our lives, are meaningful only as they stand in relationship to nature. The themes of haiku recognize this truth. We are one with nature. How could it be any other way? Clear water. Once when I was giving a workshop at Greenhaven Prison, an inmate told me that it was difficult to write haiku there because there was no experience of the season. Yes, it is very Shinto. That's a whole other topic, though, but we can talk about that later, Aussie. We were sitting in a bare room with a concrete floor in which, twice a week, the prisoners did formal Zen meditation. The heat was stifling. A large industrial-sized fan churned the slack out of the air and dumped it in the far corner of the room, where it quickly resumed its torpor. A single fly, himself a prisoner, made wobbly circles through the room, almost driven mad by the heat. "It's too bad you're locked up in here," I answered, "but you can't fence nature out. It's all around you, in everything you do." I wasn't sure whether or not they were convinced, but after lunch one of the men handed me this poem. "From the jailhouse sink, the water comes out so clear, I feel cool by it," by Jaco Medina. So with that in mind, even when we're locked up in a little cubicle, we're still a part of nature and can access nature. And the last thing that we will read today before discussion and practice is Taking a Haiku Walk, which I mentioned last session. I have found that it is best to approach haiku in simple terms. Respond to what lies directly before your eyes and choose your words in a relaxed and open way. In its simplest form, writing a haiku is closer to collecting shells than searching for the proper word. When you go to the shore to collect shells, you just walk along in a relaxed way, now and then stooping down to look at something interesting or beautiful. Sometimes you pick up a fragment for its shape or color, and sometimes a fully formed shell. If you take a daily haiku walk in this same spirit, soon you will find that haiku come all by themselves. For many years I used to take a 1 or 2 hour walk each day for the purpose of writing haiku. That was my daily practice. However, it took quite some time before I was able to learn to approach these walks in a haiku way. Matsuo Basho once wrote, "There is one thing which flows through all great art, and that is a mind to follow nature and return to nature." Since Basho's day, those words have often been used to explain what is meant by the term haiku spirit or haiku mind. But how many people really look at nature? How many people really notice nature and take what they notice to heart? Some years ago I worked on Wall Street as a proofreader for a corporate law firm. Each morning I would ride the subway downtown to Lower Manhattan, where I would work in an office without windows throughout the day. During lunch, I would always go outside. Only 50 yards away was Trinity Church. From the churchyard, it was possible to see the sky. Often sparrows would come and eat the leftover crust from my sandwich, and in the summertime there were bees and sometimes butterflies. Once I saw a large green dragonfly accompanying a stream of men in dark business suits as they passed by on the sidewalk. The dragonfly hovered just above their heads. One day I was waiting in the downstairs lobby of my building to meet a friend for lunch. It was raining, and my friend was late. With nothing else to do, I stood behind the plate glass doorway and watched people passing in the rain. From where I stood, I could see the entrance to the New York Stock Exchange across the street. As I waited, I noticed people going and coming through that door. Before they entered, the men in tan raincoats would all hunch their shoulders together when closing their umbrellas. I remember this because I had never noticed it before. Probably everyone closed their umbrella that way on a rainy autumn day. As I continued watching, however, I noticed that many of those leaving the building, they were mostly men, didn't notice the rain. Had it been raining really hard, they would have. Because there were the single raindrops of early autumn, it didn't register right away. After taking a few steps, however, invariably they would glance up at the sky, turn back into the building, and emerge a few moments later with an umbrella or a coat and hat. All except one man. One man didn't notice anything at all. He left the building without an umbrella or a raincoat. He wasn't even wearing a hat. As I watched, he walked the length of a block toward Broadway, rounded the corner, and was gone. I waited a few moments, staring in the direction he had gone, but he didn't reappear. Years later, the thought of that man is still with me. Sometimes I imagine that when he turned the corner, he stepped immediately into the lobby of another building, that he had been going only a short distance and had simply thought to himself, "What's a little rain?" But I have to admit that his manner of walking gave no indication that he noticed the rain at all. Compared to people only a century ago, we are almost all like this. The rhythms of nature are the same, but the world we have constructed for ourselves does not always account for nature. Nature occupies a small place in our lives, if and when we really notice it at all. I have found that in writing haiku, I have gradually been able to let nature back in. In the beginning, I saw haiku as an opportunity for making a very special kind of poetic art. Later, I used it as a kind of discipline. Now, haiku has become like the land itself. Each morning when I wake up, I wonder what kinds of things I will notice as I walk the boundaries of that land. Loving its whiteness, I walk around the birch tree to the other side. For the haiku walk, he suggests a 30-minute walk, dressed to suit the weather and carry a notebook. Your first 10 minutes, keep your notebook in your pocket. Just relax into the feeling of being outdoors. Notice the weather and any plants or animals you come across, but keep walking. Let your body loosen and relax. In the second 10 minutes, let nature begin to displace the ordinary day-to-day concerns that occupy your mind. Take the time to pause briefly over things that strike you as beautiful or interesting in some way. Such pauses create a space in your life for something to enter in. Then in your last 10 minutes, let that something come in. Now is the time to take your notebook out of your pocket and carry it in your hand. The space you created in your life a few minutes ago now becomes the space to write a poem. For the purpose of this exercise, you may walk out and back from home, or you may walk to some separate destination. But whichever you do, make sure that your purpose is only to walk, to be outside in nature, not to get somewhere, not even to write a haiku. After you've practiced this exercise for a while, you will find that you don't need to structure your walks anymore. Having relaxed into nature and momentarily set your other thoughts aside, you will know for yourself the proper moment to write a haiku. And that concludes the reading from the book today, so we can now start discussion, questions, and practice writing today. Thank you. Hello, Clark. I didn't see you come in. To come back to your comment earlier, Aussie, about haiku being very Shinto and the whole thought process behind it being very Shinto. Zen and Shinto are so similar because for a long time they were in the same area, because in the 6th century is when Buddhism in general was brought over from China. At that time there was already the religion, but it hadn't been named yet. It wasn't until Buddhism came that the Japanese people thought, oh, okay, we have our own stuff. And so it became called Shinto, the way of the gods, to differentiate from the way of the Buddha. But there was still a very similar thought process behind it because of the way that the cultures meshed. Second Life Stalkers, why won't you leave me alone? Go away, stalker. That is a very good one. Five, 7, 5. It's okay. There is another type of Japanese poem that does use that structure, but I forget what it is called. Crunchy leaves blowing, crisp wind tousles wolf fur cape. Winter is coming. That is a very nice one, Aussie. Two candy corn horns, and it fades before I can read it. Two candy corn horns, orange spirit with black heart. I am a teddy. That's a very nice one, Teddy. Ah. I read on Wednesdays at 6 at the Trotsdale Library, and Saturday nights at 6 everybody gets together here and reads too. Indian summer, it warms and dries the earth. Oh my, what a relief. You're doing fine, Cy. I think Phoenix should try to write one and share it with us. He didn't do it last time. My grass blew away, the street is on fire, summer is here. I like how that goes with Teddy's. His demons grin at night, the sound of an evil laugh must check under bed. It's a nice flow. So Aussie had to do butts, of course. She did do one about cat butts. Hello. Ha! Okay, this is getting old. Can we please change to a different theme for your haiku, please? Thank you. Okay, well, unless anybody else has a haiku that they would like to share or has any more questions, then I think that the workshop is over for today. You're welcome.